Hello everyone, and welcome to another mini sky tonight. So here we are into the month of May, and I wanted to show you guys some of the constellations and planets and things that you can see this time of year, as well as a unique event that's coming just around the corner. So let's take a look at what you can see. So if you look towards the southwest, and actually particularly towards the western sky in the early evening, like shortly after sunset, and if you have a clear view of the western horizon, you'll see an incredibly bright star, along with a very faint star that is right near above it. These are actually not stars. They are the planets Venus and Mercury. So in the early evening sky, you can check out these two planets as beautiful beacons in the early evening sky. Right now, Venus is in the transition of becoming the early evening planet. And so if you want to check them out, I highly recommend it. In fact, why don't we check out one of these planets up close and personal? So the great thing about the program Stellarium is it allows you to take an up close and personal view of particular planets. So here we are with a beautiful view of the planet Venus. Now, as I described in my video talking about Venus, I'll leave a link up there. Venus is often referred to as our sister planet, but she's got a lot of issues. She's constantly 900 degrees Fahrenheit, day and night. She has an incredibly thick atmosphere, so thick that it will literally crush you, and the atmosphere is filled with a lot of toxins that can be very poisonous to humans. So you'd be poison fried and squashed on Venus. We do have a few orbiters that are making their way right now, so be sure to keep your eyes and ears open to find out more information about this mysterious planet. And hopefully with these new orbiters that are going to go around the planet Venus, we'll learn a little bit more about its climate and why Venus has become such a hot planet in our solar system. But of course, obviously, since we talked about Mercury, we can't help but take a look at it as well. And believe it or not, I also did another video talking about Mercury, and I'll leave a link up here, and you can check out some of the information about our closest planet to the sun. And Mercury is a really unique planet. It's because I like to call it the fire and ice planet. Many people think, oh, Mercury is the hottest planet in the solar system. It's actually not. Venus is the hottest planet. Mercury, I like to call the fire and ice planet because on the daytime side, it's incredibly hot, but on the nighttime side, it's incredibly cold. That's because Mercury doesn't have an atmosphere to retain heat, so whatever heat it does receive on the daytime side, it quickly loses it on the nighttime side. Right. In order to be able to see very much else in terms of constellations, we have to continue to set the sun. So let's set the sun to roughly around about 9 o'clock at night. Those little streaks of stars that you see passing by are actually satellites. The great thing about the program Stellarium is it allows you to track satellites. So like if you see a little beacon streak across the sky, you can say, hey, what's that? And chances are Stellarium might be able to find it for you. So over here, towards the western sky, we'll have the constellation Gemini, the twins, with the bright stars Castor and Pollux at the heads of the twins. And then there's this bright star right here, right in the middle of the twins. That's actually not a star, that is the planet Mars. So let's take an up close and personal view of Mars. So here we are, the beautiful red planet. And believe it or not, I did a video on Mars as well. I'll leave a link up here and you can check out all the unique features and details of the planet Mars. But it's affectionately referred to as the red planet because, as you can see, it has this kind of orange red kind of glow to it. And that's because the soil on Mars is filled with iron. And since there's water on Mars and it does have a thin atmosphere of carbon dioxide, all the iron on Mars has oxidized and or rust. So Mars is a cold, rusty planet. And you can see it with a pair of binoculars or a small telescope. But nonetheless, let's take a look for some different constellations that we can see. So now that we found the constellation Gemini, the twins, over here, almost directly above your head, is this constellation that I feel he brings spring in with a mighty roar. He's referred to kind of like a backwards question mark in the sky. This is the constellation Leo, the lion. I sometimes kind of picture him as like a lion that looks like the Sphinx, but I've had other people say, oh, it kind of looks like a mouse or some type of weird cobra. You can call it what you will. The great thing about nicknames is what we call in astronomy asterisms, is you can name them whatever you want if it helps you remember the constellation. The brightest star in the constellation Leo is this star right here, which is called Regulus. It's often referred to as the king star. And it kind of makes sense because you got the king of the beasts right there, so you think he gets the king star. But nonetheless, to find a really unique deep sky object, if you take Pollux, which is the head star here in the constellation Gemini, and you take the bright star of Regulus and do a meet me in the middle routine, you'll find the constellation Cancer, the crab. Yeah, I know it kind of looks like two Y's stuck together. It looks weird. I don't see a crab out of it either. But hidden within the constellation Cancer is a really unique object. Let's see if I can try to find it here. There it is. It's very difficult to see since we have the moon right there, but hidden within here, if you have a pair of binoculars or small telescope, you'll see this kind of cluster. This is what is referred to as the Beehive Cluster. It is an open cluster of stars that you can see individual stars. But in astronomy and sometimes in navigation, it's used as an indicator. Ancient mariners often used this to determine the weather. If they could not see this cluster in a small little spyglass on a clear moonless night, it meant a storm was on the way. And of course, right in the constellation Cancer, we have the beautiful moon. So currently it's in a waxing crescent phase. Waxing meaning it's starting to get brighter, and crescent because of the beautiful crescent shape it's in. If you have a pair of binoculars or small telescope, I highly recommend looking along this line right here. This is what is known as the terminator line or the daytime-nighttime line. Because believe it or not, you can experience a day on the moon if you were to be stationed on the moon. But a day on the moon is very different from a day on the Earth. One day on the moon is roughly 29.5 days. So it literally takes a month to go from noon to noon again on the moon. So hence why we have the term month, because it's from the old word moonth, because it takes roughly a little over 29 days for the moon to complete its cycles. That's why we have 30 days roughly in a month. But the great thing about looking at the terminator line is that you get to see the craters very easily on this line, as well as you get to see shadows on the craters to help you kind of get a perspective of depth and width of these craters. All right. So let's turn towards the north here a little bit. So bear with me. And up here we have the famous asterism known as the Big Dipper. The constellation is technically Ursa Major, the Great Bear, and this is the whole bigger constellation right here, but yeah, I don't see a bear out of that either. I like to call it the Big Dipper myself. But nonetheless, if you go to the Big Dipper, notice the handle kind of makes an arc curve. If you follow the arc of the Big Dipper's handle, you'll run into this bright star right here. This star is called Arcturus. It's in the constellation Boötes, the herdsman. Now, I apologize if I mispronounced this constellation because I've seen it spelled two different ways. It's spelled Bootes, but another way I've seen it spelled is one of the O's has umlauts. It literally has two little dots above the O. And from what I was told, that O sounds like a oh, it's kind of sound. So I apologize, my German is not that great, but I am doing my best. But nonetheless, I don't see a herdsman out of this constellation. I like to refer to it as the kite, because you kind of can see like a kite here with the tail strings hanging off of it. But right next to the constellation Boötes is this U-shaped constellation right here. It goes by several different nicknames. It goes by the smile, the necklace in the sky, but its proper name is called Corona Borealis, or the Northern Crown. And if you follow the curve of the U, you run into this constellation right here. This is the constellation Hercules, the mighty hero. I sometimes refer to him as the Keystone constellation. But hidden underneath Hercules' armpit here is a really unique object. It's always difficult to point towards exactly. So if you have a pair of binoculars or a small telescope, I recommend checking out this unique object. This is what is known as the Great Hercules Cluster. It's a globular cluster because it literally looks like a big, huge glob of stars. But believe it or not, these globs of stars are some of the oldest stars around our galaxy, because these formed when our galaxy was forming and they exist outside of our galaxy. They kind of go into orbit. Some astronomers believe that they were proto-galaxies that just didn't have enough material to create galaxies themselves. So these globular clusters exist far outside of our galaxy and go into orbit around our galaxy, and they have huge clumps of stars, and they contain some of the oldest stars around. Nonetheless, let's head back to Boötes here. If you spike to the right and down, you'll run into this bright blue star called Spica, which is a part of the constellation Virgo. Yes, it's supposed to represent the Virgin, but I like to refer to as the goddess Ceres, who she's supposed to represent. So the easiest way to remember of how to find these two stars is you follow the arc of the Big Dipper's handle to Arcturus. So arc to Arcturus, and you spike to Spica. Those are the easiest terms I've been able to use to remember how to find these two stars. All right. Now that we've checked out a few constellations and a few deep sky objects, as well as a couple of planets, let me show you some of the planets that you can see in the early morning sky. So believe it or not, you can see two planets in the early evening sky, but you can also see you can see three planets in the early evening sky, and you can see two more in the early morning sky. So if you're willing to get up roughly around about 6 a.m. or so, just before the sun rises, you can check out a couple more planets. So let's take off the constellation lines here to make them kind of stand out a little bit better. So just as the sun is starting to rise, if you look towards the southeast, kind of a little halfway up the sky, you'll see two incredibly bright stars. In fact, let's change the time just a tad to make them kind of stand out, because this is what you would roughly see roughly around about 6:30 in the morning. Most of the other stars have disappeared, but these two stars will still be prevalent. This star right here is the planet Saturn, and this star right here is the planet Jupiter. So you can see at least 5 planets, 2 in the early morning and 3 in the early evening, to check them out. So here are a few constellations and planets, as well as a few D-sky objects that you can see this time of year. If you have any questions or comments, leave it down in the comments below. If you have a suggestion for a topic you would love for me to cover over, leave it down in the comments as well. Also, I wanted to show you folks one last thing, a unique event that's coming up really soon. And it's going to be a very early morning event. So it'll be on May 26th. So roughly starting around about 3 o'clock in the morning, you'll get to see a total lunar eclipse. So starting around about 3:30, 4 o'clock, the moon will start to get a little shade darker, and then come around about 5:45, 6 o'clock in the morning, it will be totally eclipsed in the southwestern sky. So if you want to see early in the morning before getting up to go to work or school and to check out a total lunar eclipse, you can check it out. So that's what I have for you today, folks. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy, and as always, never stop learning.